All right, welcome everyone. It is a little after half past the hour wherever you are. Welcome and welcome back. This is the 2025 Virtual Education Summit for advocating for wild horses. And hopefully, can you all hear me all right? I just got a little bit of echo.
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Great. So this virtual wild horse advocacy summit is being put on by Chasing Horses Wild Horse Wild Horse Association advocates. Why? Sorry, lack of caffeine. I know Chris Kaman very well, and so she is heading up Chasing Horses, Wild Horse Advocates. And then we also have Save Our Wild Horses with Heather Hellier. And then I am helping moderate. My name is Jen, and I am with the Wild Narrative Project. We are now going to enjoy hearing from Laurie Ford and eventually Kathy Jenkins. They're with the Wild Horse Education and the Oatman Burro Rehab and Sanctuary, and they're going to be talking about burros today. So I'm going to introduce you to Laurie, and then I will let her take us away. So Laurie Ford is with, as I said, Wild Horse Education. She says, before moving to New Mexico in 2003, I had a small farm in New Jersey with horses, a few burros, goats, and even a Z-donk. I worked closely with the Standardbred Retirement Foundation for years, retraining standardbreds off the racetrack so they could find their forever home with the perfect adopter. It wasn't until I moved out west that I discovered the plight of our wild horses and burros. I began to educate myself on the subject and visited the few remaining wild herds in New Mexico, eventually writing a series of articles covering the issues surrounding them for a southern New Mexico publication, Desert Exposure. Since 2012, I've been lucky enough to spend time out with other herds throughout the West who allowed me a glimpse of their arduous lives. I observed and photographed them as they went about their daily routine. The onset of one more day, they were able to retain freedom that was quickly slipping away. With my photography, I tried to bring their spirit and perseverance to the surface in hopes that the viewer would look closer at the story living within the image. It is the story that needs to be told and heard, and if there's to be any future beyond a picture. But that didn't seem like enough. So she says, in 2022, I started documenting roundups and joined Wild Horse Education to focus primarily on the wild burros who had captured my heart over the years and seemed to get little attention in the fight to save our wild ones. My photography no longer reveals beautiful images of horses and burros in the wild, but the ugly side no one wants to see, the roundups, the holding facilities, and the cruelty and even death. This was now the story I wanted to tell, but is a story that doesn't end with capture. It's only the beginning. And she says that she has a little farm or ranch, as I should say, in New Mexico that is now full of burros, rescues from roundups and kill pens, and others who were simply abandoned. All right, Laurie, thank you so much for being here with us today. And when you're ready, go for it.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. First, I want to express my sorrow over the recent loss of life from these horrific plane crashes. And my heart goes out to every person and animal their lives ever touched. It's upsetting. Anyway, my name is Laurie Ford, and I am not a public speaker, so I'll try not to make this sound like a sermon. I am the wild burro specialist for Wild Horse Education, spending most of my time doing research, sending FOIAs, and observing our wild burros on the range during roundups and in holding. I'm concerned with how often the word burro, both orally and on paper, is not used when BLM and even some advocates are discussing wild horse and burro issues. While burros are stoic in nature, their audience should beware of behaving the same. Next, please. First, the population model used by BLM was designed for horses, not burros. Population numbers are estimated every year on March 1st. Removal numbers are based on the fiscal year. These annual population numbers project future population sizes and the numbers to be removed. They're derived from aerial survey data and the annual March 1 population numbers. This March 1 number is obtained by applying a growth rate to the prior year's population after subtracting the number of adults and foals removed during that year. The growth rate is applied to every single burro, regardless of their age or ability to reproduce, except nursing foals. Basically, they're predetermining foal births and targeting these foals for removal before they're even born. Foals born in holding are not included in these removal numbers, despite being included in the March 1 equation as a foal yet to be born. I hope that's understandable. But every year, the numbers removed seem to be magically replaced with the use of these unscientific, unsubstantiated growth rates, forgetting jennies can carry up to 14 months and do not always give birth every year. I rescued 3 jennies from the same herd, and only 2 gave birth that year. Next, please. Let's see. Adoptions are down. Most adopted through the Adoption Incentive Program, where adopters receive up to $1,000 per animal after being titled 1 year later. Sales are up. Burros are over 10, burros over 10, or those of any age that have been passed up for adoption 3 times, become sale authority and they're sold. The numbers in holding have doubled, and these numbers do not include unweaned foals. There are no off-range pastures for burros, despite BLM claims that those not placed into private care will be maintained in off-range pastures where they can retain their wild status. And this isn't true. Next, please. According to USGS, BLM has little knowledge of how these growth rates respond to changing random factors like the ones listed on the screen. Next, please. The BLM's own population data is inconsistent. If herd sizes doubled every 4 years, the 3/1/24 McGee population should have been around 150, not 55. And where did all those Sinbad burros disappear to over 2 years? These are only a few examples of the flawed data carried over from year to year. Next, please. Arizona has more burros than any other state, yet the lowest death rates during capture and in holding. They manage burros like burros in Arizona. Next. California, the largest state in the country, cannot even support 500 burros. Next, please. Nevada, notorious for treating both horses and burros like livestock, has the highest death rate during capture and in holding. Next. The 2 Utah HMAs are located in areas with exploding year-round recreation. The high rate of unregulated OHV use and camping is largely responsible for the rangeland and riparian damage the burros are scapegoated for. Next, please. In 2019, 1,700 burros were gathered using the more humane, cost-effective bait and trap method. 690 were removed from bullfrog alone, with only 1 death during capture, but it took 21 days. So in 2020, BLM, knowing it would increase deadly stress levels, transitioned to the use of helicopters and roping for the majority of year-round burro roundups. Burros foal year-round, so they're always gathering during foaling season. Burros cannot be rounded up like horses. Their herd behavior is different. They travel in small groups of jennies with their offspring, and jacks travel alone or with another jack. So it forces the pilot to fly longer distances to gather up these small groups and push them back towards trap. Because burros have more of a freeze than flight response and are, according to science, generally non-athletic, they move at a slower pace, often pausing. So the pilot has to be more aggressive to get them to get moving, creating those massive clouds of toxic dust inhaled by the burros as their respiration rates soar. Next, please. The burros scatter, the wranglers chase them down and rope them. Next. During the 2022 Sinbad roundup, pregnant jennies were roped, still wearing the radio collars from 2016 they were supposed to fall off in 5 years, and they obviously didn't. Next, please. By the time these burros reach trap, they are already physically and mentally stressed, and it's only the beginning. Next, please. The stress persists through transport. Next. And into holding, where they're fed an unnatural diet, and it often leads to inappetence. They're not eating, and it's especially dangerous for pregnant and lactating jennies because of their high energy demands. Next, please. Necropsies, the autopsies they perform after the burro dies, confirm that these deaths are associated with a variety of stresses. These stresses can have both short and long-term health impacts. Further weakens immune systems that are already compromised by reduced genetic health. Respiratory illnesses can develop from overexertion and inhaling the toxic dust particles, and they can arise well after the initial roundup event with a poorer prognosis. Necropsies often note lung damage. BLM has blamed these respiratory problems on the heavy trailing to water sources, creating extreme dust conditions. Hyperlipidemia is the highest cause of death in pregnant jennies. Burros naturally have higher concentrations of fat and are more prone to hyperlipidemia. When they don't eat enough, they go into a negative energy balance. The body starts to mobilize these fat reserves for energy. The excess fat goes into the bloodstream, infiltrates the organs, and can lead to organ failure and most of the time death. Increased cortisol levels, that's the stress hormone levels, alone can promote this mobilization of excess fat. The unnatural overexertion experienced by burros during the roundups can cause capture myopathy when skeletal muscles break down, particularly when it's hot, impacting oxygen delivery and obstructing the blood flow from muscles. Deadly toxins are released and body tissues die. It can also lead to crippling muscle damage, kidney failure, heart attacks, and hyperlipidemia. I had a wild burro that got an eye infection, and I started him on antibiotics, but in a couple days, he just dropped dead. And my vet said he had a heart attack. So some initial signs of CM can be collapse, lameness, stiffness in the limbs. They're all grounds for being euthanized at trap or holding. While rarely acknowledged with burros, CM is well known in the wildlife conservation world as being human-caused and the main reason for death during capture. BLM refuses to recognize deaths resulting from any of these stress-induced illnesses as gather-related, despite the roundup being the triggering factor or actual cause of the death. But if they did, then the mortality rate would skyrocket over their 1%. So next, please. The Sinbad HMA in Utah. It's typical of many burro HMAs located in popular desert regions where they are continually being displaced, harassed, and chased. It's also famous for the colorful sandstone that, when disturbed, disperses those toxic masses of silica dust. After the 2016 roundup, 25 burros, 19% of those removed died within 2 months from viral pneumonia, typical to pulmonary fibrosis, that can be caused by the stress of capture along with exposure to pulmonary irritants such as dust. In 2022, they plan to remove 300 more from Simbad. Population was estimated at 328, but they only captured 152. It took place in a congested area with off-road vehicle traffic, and most of the burros were roped out of the sight of the observers. The death of one burro was reported as a spinal cord injury sustained after falling into a ditch he was trying to jump during gather operations. But in reality, he was being pursued so aggressively by a wrangler, he fell into that ditch. I found that body the following day within 50 yards of I-70. Almost 14% of those burros were dead within 40 days. Next, please. The Blue Wing Complex. It's over 2 million acres with an AML of 55 to 90. And well, it used to be famous for its spotted burros. They're almost all gone now. Observers were put over a mile from trap. The visibility was horrible. The heat and the wildfire smoke, you couldn't see a thing. The burros were gathered up and driven for hours. And at times we could see exhausted burros, some limping, foals falling behind, before they were driven into trap and onto trailers in a matter of minutes. They were then taken to off-limits temporary holding before being shipped to Axtell. Large numbers were held in trap overnight, including 2 one-week-old orphan foals who went without care until they got to Axtell over 24 hours later. A total disregard of gather protocol. One died. If we'd been able to have eyes on these burros, we would have noticed these orphans and brought it to the attention of the lead, so they would have been taken care of. No follow-up population survey was conducted before the 2024 roundup. Next. The conditions here were almost identical to 2022, with the addition of record-breaking heat. Almost 10% of these burros captured were dead within 40 days. The percentage of jennies that died from hyperlipidemia doubled from those in 2022. Next, please. Every HMA is supposed to have a current HMAP, Herd Area Management Plan. They define the need for removal. So they're supposed to have them before proceeding with a roundup, but this is not the case. All the things that are considered outside the scope in gather EAs should be inside the scope of these missing HMAPs. The few burro HMAs that do have HMAPs were written in the 70s and 80s and were never followed up on or updated. For example, in the 79 Big Sandy HMAP, they stated having one burro per 325 acres appears to provide plenty of living space. They discussed in great lengths how the burros dug wells, providing water for the wildlife. And they discussed about man's activities, past exploration and development, mining and ranching, that had altered the natural resources of the desert. This was 30, 40 years ago. Next, please. So why send FOIAs? So burros are not only off limits during roundups and in holding, but also when it comes to public information, research, monitoring, especially the monitoring of deaths from on range through adoption and sales. FOIAs have shown me that up to 30% of AIP adopted burros were never titled. Only a small number were ever reported dead. Why would anyone forfeit those AIP funds unless the burro was dead? Almost half of adopters adopt 3 or 4. many being repeat adopters, having untitled animals on the property, having previously reported burro deaths, some within months of adoption. The image, this adopter adopted 3 burros. 2 died within 4 months after what they called a long illness. The third one, the one in the image, was found to be in good condition, and they titled him. So, that during the 2020 Selenente gather, 250 burros were removed. Almost 20% died in holding and after adoption within 1 year. About 10% died in holding within 30 days, and they were mostly Jennies. 8% died 6 to 12 months after being adopted. These were mostly Jacks, and they were cited as found dead with no definitive diagnosis. And you got to remember, not everybody reports deaths. A lot of first-time adopters, they're afraid to report the deaths. So, and remember too, BLM claims death rates annually in holding and after adoption are about 5%. Well, our numbers show this isn't true. Next, please. So what to do? There's a list of things. Here at Wild Horse Education, we continue to focus on burro-specific issues and burro-centric litigation. This is the only way to drive changes in policy. So please check out the handout for lists of links for any more information on the things I've tried to cover and discuss. And thank you, and remember to include burros when you're talking about our wild horses and burros. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurie. Wow, I for one, feel like my eyes have been opened, and I'm so glad that we had you doing this presentation on burros.
Oh, good.
We do talk all the time about wild horses, and I am glad that you're shining on burros and their plight. And it's a lot to digest because it's horrific in a lot of ways. So thank you for doing the hard reporting.
Thank you.
And for your advocacy. And thank you everyone for listening, and stay around. So I think what we're going to do now is we've had Laurie speak, and now we're going to have Kathy.
Yes.
And Kathy, so you're here. Yay, there you are. Great.
I'm here.
Okay, so Kathy, do you have your own, I just want to make sure, housekeeping here. Do you have your own presentation to present?
I do, but it's saying that I can't share it.
Okay, that's probably because I'm currently sharing, so I'm
Okay,
gonna
perfect.
stop sharing my screen. So everybody just bear with us as we get that going. Okay, so Kathy, try now.
It says only the host can share in this meeting. It's okay, we can do it without it, if you guys don't mind listening.
Well, just a second. Let's see if...
I just made her a co-host, so try again.
Great.
Okay, that worked.
All right, great. And Kathy, if you are cool with it, I'd love to let our listeners know a little bit more about you, and then I will hand over the mic, as they say.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so we are about to enjoy a presentation by Kathy Jenkins, the founder of the Oatman Burro Rehab and Recovery Sanctuary in Arizona. And Kathy says, my love for these kiddos started in 1984 when my grandparents opened the Sugar and Spice gift store in Oatman, Arizona, a tourist ghost town famous for the wild burros roaming the streets. My career was in fire and EMS. Thank you for your service. But when I retired, wild horses and burros became my focus. I wanted to provide a safe place and care for injured and sick wild horses and burros who might otherwise be euthanized, especially the local wild burros who needed to be removed from the range and rehabilitated due to numerous types of events, including vehicle collisions. She says, while we do take in both horses and burros, the main goal of the sanctuary is to save and preserve at-risk wild burros in Oatman and the surrounding areas. Every burro who is injured, sick, unwanted, deemed a nuisance, or is under the threat of destruction deserves to be loved and know they will never be hurt again. We also provide a variety of community outreach programs, an opportunity for our burros to pass it on. And that is where I am going to leave your intro. Go
Perfect.
for it.
So we're going to talk about wildlife and wild burros on the front line. So like she said, I'm the founder of the Oatman Burro Sanctuary. We founded in 2019. So we're going to take this discussion in 3 different directions. So I'll be really quick so we can do it all within my 30 minutes. So we're located in Mojave Valley, Arizona, which is right smack dab in the middle of the HMA for the Black Mountains. So our HMA is the largest HMA in Arizona with about 1.1 million acres that the burros can house on. Our AML, however, is less than 500. Also in our HMA, we have the Black Mountains, and they are the largest herd of desert bighorn sheep that are on the lands in the entire nation. So right now, our AML is set at 382 to 478. And on their last finding from a couple of years ago is when they did their helicopter flyover, they got about 2,000 they actually were able to count, just eye count. So we're guessing that it's much higher than that. So like she said, my love and protective heart for the wild burros goes all the way back to 1984 when my grandparents opened their gift shop. So I grew up in Oatman, and the Oatman burros are one of the more coveted herds because everybody knows them from going there to visit and to play. So we're going to talk about before and beyond the roundups. So, and then we're going to talk about after holding. So our sanctuary does our best to have additional groups boots on the ground for the wild horses. If BLM needs something and we get a phone call from them, we respond. If we get a phone call from the city manager, we respond. There have been in the past 2 years, there were 48 incidences that our group reported to and went to. So we have the Black Mountains right in the middle of our area is Oatman. So Oatman is obviously known for the burros that are around the town. You can feed them, you can pet them, you can do whatever. So one of the downfalls of having wild burros roam amongst the visitors is the fact that we see a ton of burro versus vehicle accidents. And when I say a ton, I mean a ton. So this is Freedom. So Freedom was hit by this truck because he was crossing the road chasing his brother, and Freedom was hit. So when he was hit, we got him, we put him in a corral that was away from town. BLM came up and checked on him. I begged them to put him down because he was having seizures. He was mentally not there. He was completely shut down. They did not. He did not get put down. And I ended up adopting him after the 2020 roundup. So today he's on medication for his seizures, and he does very well in our herd. So this is some of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis. I know these photos are horrible, and I'm sorry, but it's a fact of life for us. We run on a minimum of 1 to 2 burro versus vehicle accidents a month. We see numerous burros that are hit and killed, and we also see many community members who are injured through this. So in 2022, BLM did an emergency nuisance gather in our area of Bullhead. Between the months of January of 22 and April of 22, they set bait traps and they started trapping. They gathered 106 burros, which seems like a lot, but it's not considering our entire area here. Their facility destination was Florence, and they had no deaths. So I'll tell you what's different from the burro gatherers here compared to everybody else in the country. So if there is a wild burro that is injured while they are doing their gather, and they believe that it can be positively and successfully rehabilitated, they will call us to grab that burro, which is something that's not done in a lot of communities.
Mhm.
So one of the biggest things that we tell people is don't feed the wildlife, view them from a distance. So our community issues. So who causes and creates the biggest issues with the wild horses and burros? The biggest issues created by the humans. They tried to domesticate the wilds. They put food and water out for them in their homes because they think that they don't have enough food and water. They start petting and interacting with them. We have a group in Mojave Valley of about 80 burros, and they will go to people's doors and will wait for somebody to come out and feed them. So vehicle versus burro accidents. Last year, we had 17 accidents. Each one of those, at least one burro died. On one of them, we had 5 deaths in one accident. We had a mom that was very pregnant who ended up delivering her baby because she was cut in half. So we worked very diligently with BLM to get an emergency roundup done there, and they were able to successfully do that. Since the day that they finished their roundup, we've only had one burro hit. So people are constantly complaining of destruction of property. So Arizona is a fence out state. You have to fence your own property to keep the burros and the wild cows out, not the other way around. So we also see a lot of injuries and accidents, not only to humans, but to the pets, the wild horses, and the wild burros. And we get that a lot in Oatman. A lot of times in Oatman, someone will take their dog with them, and the dogs ends up getting attacked by the burros, which is obviously not something that we want to see. So the Arizona BLM team. So I'm going to toot my horn for them right now. So we're a little different here because our local state and wild horse and burro specialists and leads truly believe in doing the best they can for the wild burros. So if a BLM horse or burro is injured or ill in the wild, our local specialist will pull them and they will contact one of the 4 local rescues and we will remove them. We will have them treated. And then if it's within 30 days, they can successfully be reunited with their herd. Most of the times we do not reunite them because of the issue that they went through and all of the care that they get, the husbandry and everything else. They become just a little too domestic to be able to go back out on the range. So let's talk about Socks. This is my kid. So in 2019, during the Oatman River Run for the motorcycle, Socks was hit by a motorcycle. He was hit on the last day, and he was hit at 72 miles an hour by a Harley. So it imploded his back left muscle there. So he would have very easily been a candidate for euthanasia because he had a significant injury that may not have healed. However, both Socks and I struck the lottery because when I called and talked to Chad, he allowed me to remove him. Socks had surgery 2 days later, and now he is just this happy little dude that lives his best life being wild at the sanctuary. So Fred is a burro from the Johnny HMA outside of Pahrump. So he was hit by a vehicle 4 years ago, and he ended up scattering back into the Johnny HMA, and they didn't see him for quite a while. So when they did their gather in 2023, Fred was captured, and we got a phone call. And within 30 days of him being captured, we picked him up in Ridgecrest, and we started his treatment. To date, he is a great horse. He's a little limited because we still haven't given him full authority to use everything at the sanctuary. But as of March, he will go back in for his final analysis to see exactly where we're at. So let's talk about relationship goals. So our relationship with BLM is not the normal. But there are so many differences that people could make if they would try to get a relationship with their wild horse and burro specialists. So when they get gathered, they go into a holding facility. There are many, many days. There's 3 of us that work very closely with our BLM that we will get a phone call that says, hey, we have this burro that has this, this, and this. Can you come pick them up? Laurie Ford was on a gather with us last year. that John actually drove to the site where we were reviewing the gather and pulled me aside to get one of the burros who was captured, who had club feet. So instead of euthanizing him at the trap, I picked him up the next day at the facility in Golden Valley. So one of the biggest questions that we get is, are they cared for and do their lives matter? I can tell you that our Bureau of Land Management provides veterinary care for all of the wild horses and burros under its comprehensive animal welfare program. Our specialists in Mojave County and our state lead always do what is right for the burros, no matter what it is. So this picture here, you see Ringo. Ringo's being worked on by Dr. Mosier. He was one burro that was hit 3 years ago on Thanksgiving. He was ran through the desert by some kids on an ATV and quads. He fell and he had a complete cannon fracture. He was only 4 months old. So we got a phone call from the BLM and they said, look, this guy is Big River's baby. Everybody knows him. We need something done. So 2 days later, we picked Ringo up that day that he was hit. 2 days later, he had surgery. He had a locking compression plate put on his leg. And today he's just a drug seeker. He'll hold his leg up because he wants something. We give him a Skittles and he thinks he got his medication and he goes and plays. So the Comprehensive Animal Welfare Program, it's a formal SOP for BLM that says, if this happens, this is how you have to do it. And most everything in BLM is black and white. The nice thing in our area, and I'm just going to preach our area because we work so closely with them, but in our area, there's gray in our area. Where in a lot of areas, you don't see gray. It's always black and white. The burro or horse is euthanized and they're done. That's not how it's done here, which is fantastic. So on the range, they have different SOPs during the gather, on the off-range corrals, during transportation, sale events, off-range pastures, and following placement. So they do have the wild horse and burro adoptions and sale events. And we watch those very closely because if we get a burro that is a sale burro and he does not get a good price at auction, we will absolutely try to pick up that burro so that we make sure he has a safe landing. So here's one of the auctions that we went to about 4 weeks ago. So wilds and sale barns, are they there? Unfortunately, they were. Answer is yes, they are. We see a lot of burros. So what do? We save them. There are 6 different rescues across the nation that work together to save as many of these kids as we can. We always try to focus on the BLM burros, but because they're burros in general, we work with all of them. Just recently, we had a roping ring in Eloy, Arizona, there was a group that was going to be roping burros. We ended up getting them shut down. The burros were not able to be roped. Between us and a group called Chili Pepper, we were able to save 19 burros, and they are currently being rehabilitated. A lot of them we still can't touch because they are so traumatized. We have a boy named Flapjack that is missing half of his nose. He's missing parts on both of his ears, and he has ligature marks all the way down his neck and into his chest. So a lot of people will tell us, oh, they don't actually ship them. So one of the biggest things that we hear is they don't ship them, they don't sell them, they don't go to slaughter, but they may or may not. My comment to them is always, the chance of you getting into a vehicle accident is slim, but you still wear your seatbelt. Why? The protections that these guys need are the same exact way. We have got to look at it that something can happen because the person who has them just doesn't care, and we need to. So if you're in an accident without your seatbelt, the chance of you being a fatality is a lot higher. So where do we go from here? So if we could forge or get other rescues to forge the relationships like we have with BLM, we would see a lot smaller of a number of burros that are actually euthanized. Currently at the sanctuary, we have 19 burros and 5 horses that under BLM's program should have been euthanized. They were not. They are living their best life at the sanctuary. They get all of their food, their medical care, their feet done, and everything else because our BLM took a chance on them. They took a chance on us. So people need to understand that sometimes a gather has to be done. We have asked for gathers twice in our area because we had so many kids being hit. When they did we're going to talk about the 2020 gather of the Oatman herd. They were removing 14 burros out of Oatman, and it was going to be a trap and bait. But I worked very, very closely with BLM. We knew which 14 burros were going, and our volunteers walked every burro to the truck. They were not scared. They were not riled up. We had a lead on them, and we walked them to the truck. BLM told us that was probably the easiest gather they have ever had. And they all did very well. They got on the truck, we loaded them, they went out, and our group was able to save 7 of the 14 burros, which is huge for us. Our highest amount paid at auction was $2,505 for Tinkerbell, and our cheapest was $125 for Freedom, which is the one that was hit 7 months prior to that and had the head injury. So the biggest thing that if anything I want people to leave here with is there are a lot of things that BLM does wrong, but Arizona really does it right. When there is an issue and there is a problem, we respond out with BLM very quickly, and we have a very good communication base with them so that we can save these lives that otherwise would have been lost. I appreciate you guys listening. And that's where we're at.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Wow, this is a nice balance. I know you and Laurie are close. So this is, it is nice to have a moment to hear that something seems to be working. Also understanding that the Burros in your area are dealing with a lot. Sounds like the road accidents and proximity to humans is a great challenge. But again, it is it is nice to hear that there are some wins. So want to open this up now for a Q&A. Thanks everyone for being here. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Is that okay? We'll probably touch on a lot of areas of this subject. So Nancy wants to know, do you have any for adoption?
We do. Right now we have 21 burros that have been successfully rehabilitated, and they are available for adoption. Within the last 2 weeks, we have placed 16 burros into new homes.
That's awesome. Do you have a link anywhere to throw in the chat that?
I do. If you go to oatmanburrossanctuary.com, that will bring up our page, and then it links all of our social media areas so that you guys have that.
Great. All right. Thank you. Okay, so I've got a question. You know, it really is it sounds like the model, as you described it, as being gray and not black and white, between advocates and rescuers and BLM there in Arizona. It's clear that it's different and that it's working better than it is in a lot of places across the West. So I'm curious if you could share with everyone on this call if you have advice, or if not advice, what do you see between your interactions that one might be able to work toward in developing a similar relationship with their district BLM?
So when we started the sanctuary, I actually went into the BLM offices in Mojave County and sat down and met everybody and said, this is what we're doing. This is our goal. This is how we want to do it. They had all known that Sox was hit by the motorcycle and that we had him. And Chad Benson and I actually had a very good communication about how we could make this work. So if we have something that goes on and he's gone or he can't go, he'll shoot me a text, or I'll shoot him a text and be like, hey, do you want me to go to this accident? Do you want me to go check this burro? The biggest thing that I could take out of it, and that I could even suggest to you guys, is that your local BLM doesn't make the rules and regulations. They just do their job. So if you can combine with them and try to work together, you see a lot of success. We have not only done that in Arizona, we've also done that in Las Vegas, and we have done that in California as well. That we have BLM specialists that we can call and tell them a certain burro's been hit, hurt, whatever. And we will always respond out with them, and we'll send pictures to them. We will do videos, and then a group decision is made on those animals.
I think that's great. I think there really is something to face-to-face introductions, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Just going in, and so much is lost over the phone and an email. So that seems like a really good tip. Okay, we have lots more questions. Kendra wants to know, how do you help the Burros who are accustomed to roaming free with their kin transition to a more sedentary and individual life?
So at the sanctuary, we have two herds. So we have our general population herd, which is our kids that don't have any issues, and they run in a herd group. Then we have our medical herd for any of our kids who have the broken legs, who are sick, who are injured, can't handle the regular herd. They also have their own herd, and they are together in a separate area of the sanctuary. So we allowed them to keep that wildness by still having their herds, but we also work with them on a daily basis to make sure that once they're ready for adoption, they're good citizens and can successfully be adopted.
Nice. Okay, Joanne is curious, are people ever cited by BLM for burro interactions?
I want to say yes, but no. So one of the biggest problems that BLM has with it, Tinkerbell was kidnapped out of Oatman in 2019. She ended up in a sale barn in Chino, California. And through some very diligent work of my group, we found her, and I rented a vehicle to go get her. If you go to our Facebook page, you can see her in the back of a Hyundai Sonata, and she was very angry because we were bringing her back. But we knew exactly who did it, and we know where they did it, and then we know why they did it, and they were not cited. And we see that quite often, even with accidents. The sheriff and the BLM will just say it was an accident.
Okay. Angela has a question. Any discussions of building a wildlife crossing, like a 1-mile bridge across heavily populated land, to reduce human-wildlife conflict? Or she says, what about speed limit signs and enforcements?
So in Mojave County, we do have signs up in any borough populated areas. And we have actually presented to the Bullhead City Chamber of Commerce at their Board of Supervisors meeting multiple times to try to get them to finish the fencing in Bullhead. And so far, after 3 straight years of asking, we were not successful. In Mojave Valley, we have signs up, and luckily we were able to teach the boroughs, which sounds weird, but teach them to stay away from the highways, because they have the fields and they do have water stations in Mojave Valley. And then our kids in Havasu has been working very diligently to get fencing up so that we don't have the issues that we normally do.
That's great. Let's see, I've got a follow-up question from Kendra. Do either of you know why the Arizona BLM is more open to collaboration, gentler gathers, and providing veterinary care? Was it a compassionate leader or two within the organization, or something else?
Laurie, you want that one?
I from my end, dealing with Arizona BLM personnel, it's a totally different world than the other states. I mean, they like Kathy says, they do care about the boroughs, and they actually listen. Like if I have a concern, they actually listen to me. And if I have questions, they try to answer. And it's just mainly that they listen, and they actually try to think about what they can do when we raise concerns. You know, they're limited. Their hands are tied on a lot of things. But they do whatever they can. I mean, I think it's wonderful. They're a great example for every other state. And they don't treat burros like livestock. That's Yeah, Kathy knows that I talked about how well I get along with those guys, and it's just I've told her she needs to go to Nevada and try and deal with them because it's a different world sometimes. So
Okay. Okay. Let's see, I've got a question and I'm gonna probably not pronounce this correctly. Someone says, can you talk about how the
Ohio?
yes,
Yeah.
trade is affecting, thank you. Can you say that again, please?
I believe it's Ohio.
Ohio.
Ohio. Okay, thank you. Can you talk about how the Ohio trade is affecting our wild burro herds?
Do you want to take that, Kath, or me?
You go for it.
Well, it is debatable how, like Kathy talked about, how many of these burros really end up going to slaughter because there are so many people, the game they play on the internet, it's like, oh, you need to buy this donkey because he's going to slaughter. And most of them get bought, but the ones that are not well, they might be they're just not healthy or whatever, they slip through the cracks and they do go to slaughter. And they're getting, I mean, I don't know, Kathy, it seems like they're getting a lot more for burros now than they did years ago to
So
fill that demand.
yeah, meat price on a burro right now is about $300 a burro.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, I used to
Right.
buy them for $15.
I know.
It's
Thank you for that information. Okay, let's see. Chris asks if you can share what you know about the tracking collars, please. Theodore Roosevelt National Park put the collars on 15 horses. She says we are being told they will be on for life, the life of the battery for 2 to 3 years or longer, and they're supposed to remote release. And she says we're still fighting to get them off.
Yeah, that didn't work at Sinbad. Because they put those collars on in 2016 and they captured, I think 3 or 4 of the burros still had the collars on, but there were a lot of burros, Jennies, that were not accounted for during, because they marked them. So if they had dropped the collar and they had gathered that burro, they would have known that that burro previously had a collar on. Well, they didn't come up with that many. So a lot of those burros that had the collars were not accounted for. They didn't capture them. Maybe they're out there somewhere. Maybe they died. Maybe the collar got caught on a tree because the automatic release, even when the batteries died, didn't work and they didn't fall off.
Wow.
So I don't know, maybe they've improved things since then. I'm not sure.
And Laurie, what year was that roundup?
Well, they put the collars on in 2016, and then the roundup was 22, and they captured, I think it was about 4 burros that still had the collars on. And you could see them in the pictures of them. They were roping them, putting a rope around their neck with those collars on. Um, it's
That sounds so dangerous.
Yeah, but they couldn't account for a lot of but they didn't fall off. That's the whole thing, like they were supposed to.
Wow.
Kathy, have they ever collared any in Black Mountain?
They have not. They
No.
are doing the PZP program up here to
Mhm.
where they will give some of the jennies the PZP to try to slow the birth rates. And then they're branded and put back into the wild, but we don't have the collars right now.
Right, that's good. I don't think they're safe. I mean, think
Yeah.
about all the animals that, they say don't leave halters on them when you turn them out. You've seen them, especially burros, they scratch their head or their neck with their hind foot. I mean, how easy with their tiny feet, how easy would it be for them to catch that hoof in that collar?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, their feet are so tiny.
That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
I have a question, Laurie, this might be more for you. So I'm just going back and thinking about your presentation. So you were saying there's less information on wild burros available on the BLM website compared to wild horse information. Is that what you were saying?
Well, you just don't, they always refer to horses. They
Mhm.
they once in a while they'll throw in the word burro, but when they're speaking, they are always, they might be speaking about wild horses and burros, but they're always referring to the horses. I mean, when they do the research, none of the research includes burros. With the population modeling, it's designed for horses. During the advisory board meeting, I mean, they don't even include the word burro. And then trying to find information, specific information concerning burros, it's difficult. It's a lot easier with the horses. They're just falling through the cracks. And trying to get that information is not easy. Plus, how it seems like they don't ever want us to have our eyes on these burros during these roundups. Trap is always far away. Most of the time, temporary holding is off limits. Then they go to Axtell where you can't see them. And even when they had the public tour, you couldn't see the burros. But I believe with the Blue Wing litigation, one of the things that we accomplished was now when they do the public tour, they have to let you see those burros. They're always trying to hide the burros. So go figure. It's
Mhm. So just a follow-up question to that. Can you add in the chat, please, the Wild Horse Education website and
Mhm.
any other perhaps social media accounts or other websites where people who are new to Burros specifically can go and continue
Sure.
their education after this?
Yeah, because most of you can get a lot of data, historical data on, a lot of numbers and stuff on the BLM program data website. But then on
Okay.
the handout, there's all kinds of links to find out more information on everything I talked about. They're all listed on the handout.
Okay.
But
And
I'll go
that's
ahead and think of some others I can post up there. But I think that handout has answers to everything. And for the BLM data, you simply Google BLM program data and it'll pop up.
okay. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right, let's see. Thank you so much. You all are a wealth of information, and I'm seeing a lot of people on this call who are really grateful for you sharing this specific topic. Have I missed any questions? Looking for any participants that have outstanding questions, please re-up them in the group chat real quick here. Just want to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything. And Laurie and Kathy, is there anything else that you are interested in bringing up now, considering our questions, concerns, and comments?
If you have anybody who is in the rescue business or somebody who's trying to get a relationship with their local BLM, they can call me and I can sit down and talk to them on how we started.
That
So
is generous.
my
Thank
cell
you.
phone is 928-201-5926. And I'll help you get with your BLM agent or your specialist, and we'll see if we can get the program going there. What we have here.
Amazing.
And
Right.
one thing I'd like to add, it's because I found this with Kathy, that so many of these rescues are not familiar with what advocacy groups do with about the wild burros. I think that and I mean, I found Kathy, right? There was a lot of stuff you had no idea about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that these rescues should kind of educate themselves on the litigation that's going on, the policies we're trying to change, because if you can change these policies, less burros, less BLM burros are going to end up in, in a system where they have to be rescued. So it's like, nipping the horse in the butt. It's we're trying to decrease the numbers that end up in this auction house, slaughter pipeline. And the only way we can do that is by changing policies. um it's so important that people understand that yeah, you can contact representatives, you can write letters, but litigation is the way to make permanent changes. And it's like, you don't get instant gratification. It doesn't, the thing isn't resolved in a month. It takes time, but that's how we make changes in everything we're unhappy about. It's just really important. And I'm glad I got to educate Kathy on some of that stuff.
Yes, talking with Laurie, I learned a lot of things that I never would have focused on, because our focus has always been on getting the burros and the wild horses out of a bad situation. We never sat back and said, oh, this is what's going on behind the scenes so that we can change this. When she was telling me some of the stuff, I was like, oh, is that how that works? So it was quite the education.
I think
Yeah.
that's wonderful, though. Everyone can't handle everything. And so what I've noticed in the advocacy circle or area is that it's really helpful when people that are focused on different areas of the issue can communicate with each other, and nothing's proprietary and we're all sharing, which I think is a wonderful thing about this summit as well. So I think that that's awesome. And a lot of us are becoming more aware of the current lawsuits that are open and litigating, and I have certainly noticed that that is a way to make progress.
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions. Angela wants to know if you are aware of the current roundups of burros in Reche Canyon in California. I may not have pronounced that correctly, but we'll see.
The burros up in Rice Canyon.
Reich, thank you.
Yep.
It's not Reche.
Yeah, they do have an emergency gather there right now because of the number of burros that they've been getting hit down there. Donkeyland has taken in a substantial amount of burros. They have a relationship with BLM like we do. They have taken
Which
in a
HMA
substantial.
is that, Kathy?
It is in the Riverside HMA. So
Riverside.
I'll have to look and see. It's right in Riverside city limits. So Rice Canyon goes there. You can go from in the middle of it is Donkeyland, where Bob Hope donated all the money for them to have the extra land for the burros. And so the lady who runs Donkeyland has been taking in a very substantial amount of burros lately that have been injured, as well as foals whose mom was killed during an accident. And so they're trying to do the roundup there to try to alleviate some of that. Some of the things that Peaceful Valley said that Donkeyland was working on as well was trying to get the highway there, because the highway on Rice Canyon is not fenced at all. So one of the big things that they're trying to do is to get that fenced so that we can see a difference there.
Awesome.
And Kathy, maybe talk a little bit about, you know, when somebody asks if there's consequences when people get caught feeding these our wild burros, about how hard you've tried to get ordinances where these people will be ticketed, but they don't want to ticket the people because they're tourists bringing money into the area. So, I mean, you know more about that than me.
Yeah, we did a big push in Oatman because we had so many people who would stop on the side of the road outside of Oatman. And they basically, the burros there now are trained to go stand in the middle of the road for a car to come because they see that as a food wagon. So we ended up working with the Mojave County Board of Supervisors and had signs put up. But even after the signs have been put up, the Mojave County Sheriff's Office is still not ticketing people because their philosophy is if they do not see a treat leave the hand of the person who did it, they cannot charge them for that. So it's been very frustrating to try to get that taken care of.
Yeah. And then BLM rangers can ticket them. But what do you have in Black Mountain? You got over 1 million acres and what? One BLM ranger?
We have two. We have Barry and
Two.
Terry. Yeah.
Yes. So that's same with Sinbad, with all those people. I think they had one ranger when we were on that roundup covering that whole area.
Wow. Before we leave, Kathy, would you be comfortable sharing your phone number in the chat? We've had a couple
Absolutely.
requests, and it sounds like people that are very motivated to communicate with you to make some progress. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if you could just get that in there so everybody can see it. And then I think someone says emails are great too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I'm just gonna make sure I see that phone number pop through before we wrap up this presentation so people can see it and note it. There we go.
And then how
Thanks,
do people
Chris.
access the handouts?
So what we'll do is these presentations are being recorded. So Chris, go for it.
So if you have any handouts that you'd like to share, if you want to just email them to us, we'll make them available to the people through our website, and we'll also email the people who signed up for your presentation so they have it.
Okay. Okay. Because I already sent one to you guys, so you already have that. So
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thanks, Chris. Well, we have so many people saying thank you in the chat. I hope that you're seeing them. Thank you for this information. Thanks for the presentation. This is great info. Thank you. Lots of hearts. Just want to thank you both for your time and your dedication and for all of this information. This has been incredibly generous of you.
Thank you very much.
don't forget to include burros when you're talking about wild horse issues.
You got it.
Okay.
You got it.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kath. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Laurie.
Everyone have a wonderful day.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.